Welcome to the Cowboy Bros podcast. I'm your host, Terrence. With me is my co-host, Jason, calling in for the Batcave in Indianapolis. Jason, how are you, my good man?
You know what it is, bro. It's record day here with the Cow Park Bros. I would say that's up, but I don't want you quoting more songs. But hey, man, it's a good day. Had a nice long weekend. I think everybody definitely could have used that extra day off. So I'm happy. I'm feeling good. I'm sure you're feeling good. I can tell in your face. Let's get into it.
Yes, sir. Thank you for listening. This is episode 59 of the Cow Park Bros podcast. For the uninitiated, Cow Park Bros is the podcast to hear. We are a weekly podcast for fans of sports, current events, and entertainment.
And as always, we're your hosts, Terrence and Jason, and every single Thursday, we come to you with a brand new episode where we discuss the current events of the day, sports, and the athletes we love.
And even some of the athletes we loathe. No matter the topic, you can expect a brutally honest and fun exchange of snark while learning through the lens of our 30 years of a friendship that originated in Calumet Park, Illinois.
And folks, for more Cow Park Bros content, make sure you connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and TikTok under the handle Cow Park Bros or Cow Park Bros Podcast for more behind the scenes of the show and just to engage with us every single day. But do not forget that the Cow Park Bros Podcast is available to listen and subscribe for free wherever you listen to podcasts.
Like us, love us, share us, follow us. And folks, if you like us, hell, why wouldn't you?
That's right, folks. Like Terrence said a minute ago, we are the podcast to hear and watch. So make sure you're living it, loving it, and doing it.
Okay. We're going to start off the show with the Uvalde, Texas shooting. And a lot of times, some people will ask either Jason or myself why we wait to take on certain topics. Sometimes it's because, frankly, we feel we're not equipped either emotionally or informationally to even speak to what's a potential topic might speak to. Uvalde, Texas, and the shooting and the aftermath is Exhibit A for why we don't put a topic on the show as soon as something happens. Because what a difference a day makes, Jason. There's been more information about what happened or what should have happened in the last 7 days. There's also been an assortment of press conferences. So, I mean, first off, you've got 19 children dead. You've got 2 teachers dead. Unspeakable carnage at the hands of a just turned 18-year-old kid or boy or man. I mean, the reality is he was old enough to know better. You know, I don't get real caught up on whether or not he's a boy or a man. Point is, it's legal to have a gun. And as soon as he could legally get one, he got one. And he ruined a lot of people's lives, including his own, his family's lives. And what's been fascinating to see for me, Jason, is one, you have the catastrophic, horrible event, this loss of life. But now you also have the reaction and how people are going to use the event to make a political statement or not make a political statement and simply just carry on like they've been carrying on their entire lives. Greg Abbott is one of those people. And I think the first press conference that I paid attention to was the one that Greg Abbott led off, where he just straight from central casting just goes on and on and on about mental health. And not one item was dedicated to, you know, the sort of firepower that this kid had access to in a relatively short amount of time. He was basically, you know, absent from school. He was pretty much a walking truancy complaint. And at no point did that come up in that press conference. Because really all that was about thoughts and prayers. And don't you dare try and say that it has anything to do with guns. So I've talked for a little bit. What are your thoughts?
So I didn't see any press conference when it comes to either Greg Abbott or anybody else involved in Texas with this. I did see an interview with a certain Texas senator, which I'm going to get into. But yeah, it is very interesting how certain people, and I'll specify about this probably a little bit later too. Certain people want to take the attention away from the possible need for gun reform away, like you just said, put it on mental health or other factors as well, things like that. And I understand the sentiment that's always been out there that guns don't kill people, people kill people, which factually is correct. But and I don't think I need to throw the numbers out there because people have been seeing them all for the last week. There have been a ton of mass shootings in this country, and unfortunately, also a pretty high number of school shootings as well. Now, obviously, like I said, after each one, there's going to be a huge reaction to people for people when it comes to whichever side of the gun argument discussion that you're on. It always comes up around this time, but it seems to hit harder when it's a school shooting, an elementary school in this case. One of the kids in this was as young as 9 years old. 9. That's crazy to me. That those kids' lives who are mostly 10 years old, some 9, whatever, their lives are gone because of somebody was able to purchase 2 AR-15 type weapons. And I say this to everybody whenever we talk about this. When it comes to the right to bear arms, I don't foresee that changing at all in this country. I don't think anybody's going to be knocking on people's doors, taking their guns away. Don't think that's ever going to happen. But what I will say to people, and I've still, every time I've talked to somebody about this when it comes to anybody is pro-gun and all stuff like that, I've never gotten a valid answer. But I'll say this to anybody. If you aren't in an active military or you aren't a police officer, why does anybody need a weapon like an AR-15? Why? For what? No. The fact of the matter is, no one needs an AR-15. Nobody. The problem is people want it. And I'm going to throw some numbers out later, but there's one I want to throw out there. 8 million AR-15 weapons circulating in the country right now. 8 million. That's, well, I was reading a lot of stats about guns in this country when it comes to all this stuff and how much stuff's out there. When I saw that number, I'm like, 8 million? Now, percentage-wise, obviously, compared to the number of people, it's pretty low. But if you think about it, it's still a pretty high number. You guys can look up the population of this country, and that's fine. Then do your math and compare that to 8 million. Just 8 million just of that type of gun or type of weapon. Not to mention all the other countless type of stuff as well. Again, never going to advocate for people to get their guns taken away. Not going to be mad if it happens, but I know it's not. But there is never a need for anybody to, if again, unless you're current military or a current police officer, no one needs that kind of weapon. There's no reason that a kid, like you said, working at Taco Bell, whatever fast food joint he was working at, who just turned 18 2 months prior to the shooting, no reason whatsoever he should very easily, granted he might have done it legally, but there's no reason why he should have been able to get 2 weapons like that. Not to mention all the 350 rounds of bullets or whatever he had. No reason whatsoever. None. And again, you guys have our email addresses and stuff like that. You know where to find us on social media. If you have a valid reason as to why somebody might need those kind of weapons, hey, messages, let me know. Tell me why I'm wrong. But I guarantee whatever answer you say will not be valid or viable, as my buddy Terrence like to say. Those are kind of my initial thoughts. I definitely want to hear on Ted Cruz a little bit about this, but I want to hear some more of what you got to say about anything I might have just said or any additional thoughts you have.
Well, a couple things. Number one, think about, and I'm not saying you haven't, often for a lot of individuals in our society, gun ownership is becoming a rite of passage. It's almost like your first razor, okay? And in certain states where the gun culture is just so, ingrained, like we're not talking a situation like, oh, I can't wait to go hunting. Like this guy was not talking about shooting for sport. This guy had violent ideations from the get-go.
Which is apparently even documented going back to September of last year, FYI, which again, I can mention that later, but go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. But I also think about the fact you said, unless you're in the military or unless you're a police officer, okay, well, what about those who are retired police officers or retired military? But ultimately, the reasons why people, Jim Jeffries, the comedian, has a great bit about this, about trying to rationalize the affinity for guns. And good luck trying to rationalize it. It's like me and Sour Patch Kids. You just want them. The end. The issue then becomes when you effectively have no means that any governing body is going to take on, because what you're basically saying is that school children, teachers, staff, custodians, they're just the cost of doing business in a nation that has to have this. And so what I'm saying is, if you're going to have the likes of a Greg Abbott, who, while him and other people can say things like guns don't kill people, people kill people, I'm like, yeah, but everything else that people can use to hurt someone else, we seem to come up with some sort of counterbalances to ensure that it is not as likely for you to use to hurt people, except in the instances of firearms in our country. And my thought is, stop insulting our fucking intelligence every time there's a school shooting, Greg Abbott, or any other governing official like Greg Abbott. Like, you're better off saying nothing. Because
well, they can't. Well, they can't do that. So
they totally can. They totally can.
Oh, okay.
Totally can.
Okay, you're right. They can, but they're not going to, because they can't, because of what's expected of them. Go ahead.
Right. Yeah, but I don't want to get into what is expected. I'm getting into the fake ass crocodile tears, thoughts and prayers presentation that him, Greg Abbott, and other elected officials do every time there's a catastrophe like this. I've been seeing this since Columbine. Even the reporting is starting to mimic. Everywhere else is a tight-knit community. And it's going to seem like I'm giving, journalism a hard time. No, it just seems like there is a story in another city like Uvalde from a year ago, or in some cases 6 months ago, or in some cases a month ago. And I'm sick and tired of people insulting my intelligence on this one. That's all. The unfortunate police response, it's heartbreaking. Based on what's been presented the last 7 days, it looks like there was an opportunity to engage with the shooter. And I've heard things along the lines of, oh, they were effectively waiting for more backup, or things along those lines. Listen, when Joe Schmo, who's 18 years old, can even the odds with a couple of assault rifles and that much ammo, the argument about arming teachers, school resource officers, all that shit goes out the window, man. Because if you're going to have a society where basically the average Joe Schmo, rank and file dude in your community can be packing heat like that, you could have 5 school resource officers. It's not going to make a difference, especially if they don't act right then and there. Ironically, someone's going to use this as a rationale for the police to get more funding in that community. I guarantee you, mental health is not going to be where the money goes. They might get a little bit, but I'm guaranteeing you it's going to be a hell of a lot more body armor based off of that encounter.
So I think most of us are pretty familiar with Ted Cruz, former, I don't want to say presidential candidate, but he was in the running for the Republican side, but Trump beat him out, not just him, but other people as well. But anyway, so apparently he was at a vigil, down in I'm not sure if it was in Uvalde exactly, but it was in Texas for the victims of that. More thoughts and prayers, which I'm not going to put that just on politicians, because people, like general citizens, say that same thing too. Which is, again, it's time to stop saying that and actually do something. Now that's to the politicians, but it's also on the people also too. And it's going to take the majority of the people in this country to do this. to actually speak loudly enough to go against it, to say, hey, no, something needs to change. But anyway, so Ted Cruz is at this vigil, and there was a reporter from a British outlet. Basically, took that moment to ask Cruz, he said, hey, do you think this is time for, reform gun laws here in the United States? And Cruz responded, quote unquote, it's easy to go to politics, kind of to get some deflection. And then the reporter responds, but it's important and it's at the heart of the issue. So, which is true, which is absolutely true. And then Cruz goes into some, sort of tirade or whatever, kind of defend certain political actions have not been taken. So he says the proposals from the Democrats and the media inevitably, when some violent psychopath murders people, Cruz said, before he was cut off by stone. The journalist said that the alleged shooter was a violent psychopath who was able to get weapons so easily, so forth and so forth. But the senator ignored him and said, if you want to stop violent crime, the proposals the Democrats have, none of them would have stopped this. So to Ted Cruz, I would say, okay, what proposals have the Republicans come up with? It shouldn't matter who comes up with something. Okay, you don't agree with what they come up with. What are you coming up with? What are some of your buddies in Texas coming up with? What is anybody coming up with who actually has some political power and juice? In this country, nothing. We're seeing other countries taking action. We're seeing other countries who actually have a gun culture, but they don't have mass shootings. We do. And that's what the report is also getting into. He's like, why these mass shootings only happen in America? Then Cruz goes off in another defensive mode, said that's exceptionalism, and you have a political agenda, God bless you, and started walking off. Now, of course, the reporter is still talking to him, and then this part kind of really is what pissed me off. Cruz goes into some little tirade that really has nothing to do with what the reporter's talking about. So you automatically know Cruz knows he lost the argument because he's bringing up something else that had nothing to do with the topic at hand. But he goes into this is Cruz, why is it that people come from all over the world to America? Because it's the freest, most prosperous, safest country on earth, the senator said. First of all, the timing of that statement, as far as it's the safest country on earth, at that vigil is probably the worst timing ever. To say that when 19 children 10 years old or younger are dead, but it's the safest country in the world on earth? Really, bro? That was horrible timing by him. And again, more deflection, a topic that has nothing to do with it. Yeah, people do come here, but just because they come here for one certain aspect of this country doesn't mean everything you just said is correct. Yes, he might not agree with the Democrats, whatever they come up with when it comes to gun policy. Now, I'm not backing Democrats at all. You know that. Well, when you start deflecting to, okay, well, this group isn't coming up with anything, what are you doing?
Well, yeah, that's what it was, is that, he's talking shit about the Democrat plan. I'm like, listen, you're talking all this shit, be a leader. What's your plan? Let's hear it. Other than the status quo, because fuck you and your status quo. That's what people are trying to tell you right now. Because I guarantee you, it's not political if you didn't come home with your kid that night. All right, that's about as objective as you can be about it. If you didn't come home with your kid tonight, or you was waiting on your wife or husband and they didn't come home that night, hell, one of the poor souls, his wife died in the massacre. He had a heart attack days later. That's what makes me furious at people like Ted Cruz and Greg Abbott, because they're full of shit. Greg Abbott, what a piece of work. Of course, he couldn't resist. And this is fairly predictable. Anytime there was going to be like a mass shooting, as soon as people were saying, well, maybe there should be some sort of change in policy, they couldn't resist from bringing up Chicago. That's why Greg Abbott's an asshole. Because it's deflection 101. You don't think people up here recognize that policy didn't fix the violence problem in Chicago? You talk about it every day on Cowboy Bros if we wanted to.
So real quick, before we end this segment, I mentioned there's some numbers I want to bring up just to kind of point things out, just to kind of hammer it home in people's heads that something needs to be done. Does anybody have an answer for what can be done or what's willing to be done? People are going to have varying opinions. We don't have to go into it on this show, but 100 people are killed every day in this country to gun violence. That includes 12 children a day of that. There's been 950 school shootings since Sandy Hook, which is only in 2012, by the way. But there have been 27 so far just in this calendar year alone. We're not even a full 5 months into the year yet. I mentioned the whole 8 million AR-15 type weapons out there. I was watching something on YouTube, something from The Daily Show, and they were talking about how everybody says, what stops a bad guy with a gun? A good guy with a gun? I'm sure we've all heard that. Well, it's a very small percentage of people that actually successfully defend themselves against a gunman with their own gun themselves. I've seen it between 1%, 3%, less than 1%. So either way, very small number. I was having a conversation with a guy in our Facebook group, our sports Facebook group. I won't name my name, of course, but he's talking about he doesn't want to do all this extra background check stuff, which most people actually do agree with background checks, but he didn't want to do all this stuff. But he got to the point of saying that we've only been dealing with school shootings for the last 20 plus years since '99 in Columbine. Okay. In the grand scheme of things, since the creation of the country, the Constitution, all that stuff like that, yeah, that number itself is a small number, only 23 years. But again, 950 just school shootings, not including the mass shootings, but 950 school shootings just since Sandy Hook, which I believe was 2012. Again, folks, if you are one of those people that think nothing needs to be done when it comes to the actual true gun reform, then I really don't know what to tell you. You may just be somebody who just wants to keep your guns and you're afraid of losing. Is what it is. But last thing for me, and I'm done. I mentioned the country looking to change their gun situations, even whether they need it or not. Canada. The other country that actually has a gun culture, probably similar to us, but doesn't have any mass shootings, Switzerland. Information's out there, folks. Look into how those countries do things. What's the difference between our gun culture and theirs? Look it up, look into it, and then think about it for yourself in your own head. I'm done.
Yeah. One thing I'm gonna just end the segment on is background checks aren't the answer, because guess what? 9 times out of 10, whoever is leading off these massacres, they don't have a record, so you can't use that. Can't use that. They have no record, and they buy firearms through legal means. Help me help you. All right. That concludes our segment on Uvalde shooting and the response, and the less than stellar response from one Greg Abbott. Coming up next, we're going to be talking about the NIL impact for high school players. Coming up next on Cal Park Bros.